Welcome to part 3 of the BigUn. So far, in the first 12 days, Mike and I have covered a little over 2,000 miles and have ridden through 10 European countries, ending up in Venice, which is where we parted ways with our good friend Steve, who had been with us throughout Slovenia and Croatia. We've still got a lot of miles to cover, though, through Italy, France and Spain, before making our way to the ferry back home, which was preying on my mind a little.
Now, as we're heading deeper into Italy, we're going into Florence. We'll see Pisa on the way past, San Remo, and then we're headed west across France, but not just the Côte d'Azur. We'll be bouncing through various mountain areas and so on.
Stopping off in San Marino on the way over to Florence in the morning.
Of course, yeah. Have a cup of coffee and to say hi, knock off another country.
Yeah.
Why would you not?
Yeah.
And then it's Spain, the Pyrenees, bits of Picos and home, which sounds really easy. But
There's a hell of a lot to do between now and then.
Yeah, but we've got 3 weeks to do it.
And we've got plenty of time to do it.
Yeah, so hopefully not quite so tired. I don't know about you, but right now I'm feeling a little bit careworn.
Yeah, well, yeah. A little bit homesick too, as well, to be fair. You know?
Yeah. Don't tell the wife.
Missing my dog. Oh, and my wife.
Yeah.
But and being at home, but no, another 3 weeks of this I could cope with.
Yeah, well,
quite happily.
We're kind of going to have to.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Today, day 13, we put in a lot of hot, boring motorway miles on our way to a pilgrimage. We were off to Tavullia, home of a certain motorbike racer. If you haven't guessed who yet, it'll be pretty obvious fairly soon. Yup, we're in the birthplace of one Valentino Rossi. Once we'd navigated past this rather confusing signpost, it was obvious that we were in the right place. The clues were, literally, all around us. We decided to check out the VR46 International Fan Club, which turned out to be a sparsely populated and very expensive t-shirt shop. Time then for a walk into the village, which had a nice bar and at least some cycling action. I was beginning to think they'd got the wrong place after all.
And today, after we'd seen Stephen off,
Yeah.
We are now in Valentino town.
Yeah, Tavullia.
Yeah.
Which, in some ways,
A bit of a disappointment.
yeah, it's not quite what we perhaps built it up in our minds to be. It's a lovely place, and we found a fantastic bar with a lovely lady who really looked after us.
Yeah.
But in terms of the spectacle of Tavullia, well, there isn't one.
No.
Not really.
No.
The next morning the locals did their best though, with the wheelie show and the grand exodus of a moped tour. Not anxious to get caught up in the melee, Mike and I did our own bit of sightseeing before setting off for pastures new. Our long-awaited personal invitation from Valentino seemed to have got lost in the mail, so we had to make do with a little old-fashioned skeet. We'd have only shown him up anyway. Our run out of Tavullia saw us head for Florence via San Marino. This, of course, added another nation to our tally, taking us to a total of 13. Arriving in San Marino, for one horrible moment, I thought we'd been overtaken by the gang of mopeds that we'd left in Tavullia. Thankfully, these were scooters, so we were let off the hook a little. San Marino is essentially a quiet hilltop town with a population of around 35,000. The hillside views over the surrounding landscape are simply fantastic, and you can't help forgive those who live up top from having a sense of maybe superiority over those living down below. The inhabitants of San Marino don't have the place entirely to themselves though, as each year they have some 2 million visitors, which makes for a lively and dynamic city centre.
Heading towards Florence.
Yeah, we found our way to San Marino first.
Oh, that's
Lovely
right.
climb up
Yes.
the kind of hillside.
Yeah.
San Marino, what were your thoughts?
It was very interesting, historical, a place that you'd have to visit, but extremely busy. Whenever you go into anywhere that's going to be attractive to tourists, there are going to be plenty of people who want to sell tacky stuff, aren't there? So
Yeah.
it's just part and parcel of the whole thing,
Yeah.
and something you have to expect.
But it was nice having wandered up the town. The views were great.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, you could buy any type of armament you want.
That was quite a surprise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I forgot about that. So you go into a shop and there's every kind of weapon, firearm that you could wish to buy.
Yeah, I thought only in America, but
Yeah, I guess that, I don't know, maybe we need to Google it, but I guess that the rules in San Marino, being an independent state, they can choose what the rules are with regard to firearms and things like that.
yeah, the question is raised: what can you do with them once you take them out of San Marino?
Yeah, I would think you'd struggle, wouldn't you, if you try to cross any borders with one of those?
Yeah,
weapons.
So feel free to go and
Yeah.
let loose in San Marino. Not the safest place, if that is the case, maybe.
Time then for a quick exit, Benny Hill style. In Italy, once you're off the autostrada, the roads are generally pretty flowing and great fun. Not necessarily the best quality tarmac, but you can forgive that in return for an entertaining ride. We calmed down a little though by stopping at a popular bike spot on the way into Florence. And now for a marked change of pace. It was time for a little sartorial elegance and culture. After 2 weeks of solid riding without a break, Mike and I decided to hang up our boots for a day and go and explore the town. There were, of course, numerous relaxing ways to take in the sights, but Mike had other ideas. We bought ourselves some day tickets, and while we were waiting for the main event, we took a look around the cathedral. And then Mike's devious plan became clear. A climb up the 400 or so steps of the Campanile Tower in 35 degrees sweltering heat, made all the more challenging by hordes of sweaty tourists crammed into tight spaces and very narrow stairwells. A fleet of sadistic ambulance drivers waited at the bottom for those who succumbed to the heat. After we'd completed the walk and we were clear of the bell tower, my heartbeat was still well over 140, so I was very nearly a customer. Luckily, St. Michael of the Beers was ready with a rescue remedy, and it seemed to do the trick. The rest of the day was spent at a more gentle pace, trying to avoid buying anything in the shops, and just taking in the great sights of Firenze. That, of course, and a visit to the laundromat, so we were properly prepared for the next phase of the tour, taking us across France and Spain.
Pisa, the Leaning Tower has to be visited. What I wasn't quite ready for was the kind of shanty town of sellers of just about anything
Yeah.
that you had to go through to get to even see the tower.
Yeah.
Kind of like going through the perfume stuff at an airport.
Yes.
You just had to make your way past.
Yeah.
So terribly sorry to the history buffs out there. We made our way past. We put our helmets down. We took minimum pictures and buggered off out.
Yeah.
The next day was spent mostly on hot motorways, but we took a break to pop in and see the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Parking wasn't easy, and we had to fight our way through hordes of street sellers to get there. Note to self, if you're going to visit a major tourist attraction, allow a bit of time and try not to do it on quite such a hot day.
The motorway thing, a really hard day, we were totally and utterly bushed, and we found our way to Bobby's Executive Hotel. What a terrible title, but actually not a bad place.
Not a bad place, quite a little bit tired in places. It could have done with a bit of an update, but very welcoming.
Yep.
Made us feel very much at home until 2 coachloads of...
Yeah, my heart died a little when the 2 coachloads of people even more senior than you and I turned up.
Yeah.
Having said that, the reception staff said, that's okay, here's a secret service lift used by the staff,
Yes.
so we could get to our room, and that was great.
Yeah.
And they organised us a beer.
Yeah.
And then we found our way to a restaurant just out of the way because we wanted to be a bit quieter.
On a campsite, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should have realised that, a campsite restaurant might be catering for kids.
Yeah.
Volevo vedere stare morbido, dai, su, mettiti giù, oh! E adesso, bambini, signori, buonanotte, oh.
And then the following morning we decided, was it about that time we decided we needed to be travelling early in order to avoid the really fierce heat of the day as we made our way along the south of France.
Mad dogs and Englishmen ride in the midday sun, and we were trying to avoid a bit of that, so you're right, we got ourselves up fairly early and headed off to Antibes.
Yep.
The easy route westward from Antibes is via the coast road, so naturally Mike and I took to the mountains. Headed uphill away from the coast, we went in search of the nation that, well, nobody knows about. And the reason's quite simple. It came about by accident. When the Kingdom of Italy was formed in 1861, Seborga was simply left out, and they've claimed independence ever since. As a micronation with a population of just 350, I don't suppose Italy's too bothered about the threat of invasion. Mike and I slowed down for immigration control, but realised that it was totally unmanned, so we continued into the heart of the nation. We parked up in the central square and took a good look round. However, it soon became apparent that the entire nation was closed. Perched on a hilltop with lovely views, this was a great place to stop, but you'd never mistake it for a hive of industry.
Of course, we went to a new country. We turned off 5 kilometres away, heading north from the coast.
Yeah.
And we found ourselves in Seborga.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we got there quite early in the morning, and Seborga had not woken up yet.
No. But that was okay, because that just meant there were no people about to bother us, so we could just have a wander around and take some photographs. And
take the mickey in the Sentry Tower without getting arrested. That was fine. So Seborga was a short, brief visit. Kind of hoped to get a cup of coffee, but next time Seborga, try and get up by like 9 o'clock. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Feeling somewhat cheated in our ambition to have coffee with the Seborgan government, Mike and I carried on anyway. We had a lot of miles to cover, and we were headed up to the Col de Brau, high up in the mountains. As we'd arrived down south via the Alps, the Dolomites, and the mountains of Slovenia, it would be easy to regard the Col de Brau as a little of a disappointment. However, that would be to deny the fantastic sights given by the balcony roads and the many rock-covered tunnels on the route, which of course gave me the opportunity to test my new bike horn. At around 1,000 metres, the Col de Brau's not particularly high in terms of mountain passes. However, to add a certain frisson to the expedition, my bike started running low on fuel, and I wasn't too keen on freewheeling all the way down to Monaco. we were saved by Google Maps that located a small petrol station in a tiny village up the mountains. This left us with a clear run down to Monaco and the Cap d'Aille, and of course a clear view of those lovely terracotta roofs as we came down towards the coast. Our grand plan was to visit a car museum in Monaco, but we were hot and bothered by this stage, so we nodded at the signpost and just carried on to Antibes. We checked into our hotel, had a quick shower, and only then realised just how far out of town we were.
And we had to call a taxi to get into the centre of the town, which cost us the earth.
Yes.
To go to a very nice fish restaurant.
Yeah.
But because we hadn't made a reservation, the guy placed us right near to the road,
Yeah.
kind of on a zebra.
Outside of the demarcation lines, which for
Yes.
the people who had booked.
Yeah,
So we were sort of outside of the border, if you
yeah,
like.
humans, others,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, yes.
But the food was okay.
Food was fantastic.
The service, however, was not, and I had to resort to my best Marcel Marceau impression just to get the attention of the waiters. Whilst the food was lovely, the cost was truly eye-watering. Added to our taxi costs, it made for a very expensive evening. I guess that's only to be expected, though, if you stay on the Côte d'Azur. And now we're on our way to a real highlight of the trip. We're on the Route Napoleon, headed for the Gorges du Verdon, and in particular, the Route des Cretes. The straight roads of the lower slopes soon give way to a narrow cut through the mountainous rocks. A fun ride, but you do have to be very careful about your sightlines. Speaking of which, we nearly missed the turn-off to the circular Route des Cretes, which turned out to be a real highlight of the trip. The route's quite narrow and there are no barriers, so it's made a one-way road for safety. And a fall from this height would definitely scratch your paintwork.
So, leaving Antibes, we then set off right up into the mountains again, the Gorges du Verdon.
Which was just...
Yeah, I've always wanted to do that, and it was jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
The views to the side of that. And the route we chose was to go up towards the Gorges du Verdon and then almost back on ourselves and do a loop called the Route des Cretes,
Yeah.
which has lots of views over the side of sheer drops.
Yeah.
Great fun. And one of the highlights there was to see a bird which we think was a vulture,
Yes.
flying somewhat below us and using the thermals to wander around.
Some good video footage of that.
Yeah, just a fab memory to
Yeah.
stop there. Surface a little bit quarrelsome at times.
Yes.
And given the fact that there were big drop-offs and bugger all barriers,
Yeah.
it did make you concentrate on your braking markers
Indeed.
and all that kind of stuff.
There aren't too many hotels up in the mountains, so Mike and I found ourselves staying at a working farm.
So this was a very rural barn
Yes.
on a farm, or
Yeah.
I guess a working farm.
Yeah.
They'd got a swimming pool, they got a restaurant,
An auberge.
an airbase indeed. And we've settled in and said, that's marvellous, can we have a beer? They
Yeah.
served us a beer. can we book ourselves in for dinner tonight?
No.
You're too late. We've sold out. Go away. Well, they did it very nicely, but being told to go away even nicely is not overly helpful. So we found ourselves in the next village along,
Yes.
called Forcalquier.
I'm glad you can remember all these names, because
I can't remember all of them, and I can't remember all of them in the right order.
No.
But I can remember some of that one. Nice church,
Yeah.
lovely restaurant
Yes.
in the middle of a back street somewhere.
And a bit of a festival going on, I think. There was some music being played in the square.
Yes, of a kind of a
Sort of,
Eastern origin,
yeah,
I
Moroccan
guess. Yeah.
type thing.
Yeah, it was good fun to just sit and watch that for a while our taxi driver patiently came back and collected us.
Yeah.
The next day saw Mike and I headed, on the recommendations of a mate, up to the heights of Mont Ventoux. En route, we had to pass through swathes of lavender fields, or as Mike would graphically call it, purple with bees. After riding over so much mountainous terrain over the past few weeks, I thought I'd seen it all. But Mont Ventoux, the windy mountain, was a total surprise. In most of the mountain ranges that we'd ridden so far, you could see as far as the nearest peak. But with Mont Ventoux, the earth just seemed to drop away and the view was limitless. It was definitely time to pull over and take in the full impact of this fantastic natural spectacle. There's a point. I can't think of any other mountain that I've seen that looks like Mont Ventoux, with its stark appearance and lack of vegetation. It's like something from a rocky lunar landscape, or perhaps a James Bond film set.
As we came over the top, we were met by an evil Bond villain flying with in the formation of a couple of helicopters.
The two helicopters flying.
Yeah, did you see the cat there? Yeah. I just imagined the cat in the helicopter.
Yeah.
That did it for me.
I'd led on the way up, so it was only fair that Mike took a turn. Anyway, who can get lost going down a mountain? Well, me, obviously, if you checked out our earlier adventures. As we headed down the mountain, Mike and I were looking forward to our visit to Nimes, dubbed the French Rome. There would of course be plenty to see, but just as importantly, we had been riding for a week without a break, and it was an opportunity for us to hang up our boots once again and take in a few of the sights as walking tourists. Nimes had a warm welcome for us, but not necessarily in the way we'd expected. When we ordered a beer with our evening meal, well, this is what turned up. Mike was distinctly unimpressed, and I had to call back the waiter and get a replacement that looked, well, more regular. At the time, we simply put it down to a language miscommunication, but the reason we were served these pink drinks became abundantly clear later on. More of that later. Right now it's time to visit Nimes. It was another scorching hot day, and I could have planned our visit a little better.
the learning point for me, and this is, if you're touring in very, very hot towns, this is something to bear in mind. Start at the highest point and get the taxi driver to drop you off there, and then amble down to a bar where you can drink beer and eat ice cream until you're rescued by said taxi driver.
Our day in Nimes started with a visit to the sizable and very impressive amphitheatre, where we learned rather too much about the practices of the time. Not far away was the Maison Carrée, an amazingly preserved Roman temple. The French Department of Antiquities spent over 44,000 hours restoring the temple. I guess that explains why it's in such good condition. Mike and I then spent a little while wandering around the town and taking in the sights. The Roman-era waterways in particular gave a relaxing vibe to the city centre experience. After a coffee stop though, it was time for the final item on our agenda, the Tour Magna.
Anyway, it was a tower, a Roman tower, fairly well preserved, and one that you could walk up.
And the clue might have been this was a watchtower.
Yes.
That was built in order for the defenders to be able to see if anybody was coming to attack the town.
And you're suggesting that I missed this in my planning?
Well, it just seems logical that if you're going to build a watchtower, you'd build it on the highest point.
This was, of course, Michael's not so subtle way of telling me that he didn't appreciate walking up to the tower from the centre of Nimes. It was a hot day and we were in need of refreshment, so I offered to get some bottles of water. Michael here is telling me that he only wants one. Finding our way back down to the town, we settled for a beer at a cafe overlooked by the Maison Carrée that we'd seen earlier. The street scene got decidedly lively, and we realised with a bump that we'd arrived in Gay Pride Week. Whilst I was enjoying the parade, it suddenly occurred to me why that waiter had given us the pink Monacos the day before.
He suggested, didn't he? He said, Monaco? And we, yeah, beer, Monaco,
yeah,
whatever.
beer, Monaco, wherever it comes from. Yeah.
And 2 pink beers turned up.
So,
Which
I guess...
disgusting.
Yes, 2 fellas travelling on their own.
Yeah.
Gay Pride Week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had we known, we might have been able to guess that, but...
we'd have put on our deeper voices, I think.
And well, the thing is, I'd have just gone with it, but for the fact that these Monaco drinks were properly disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried a bit, you tried a bit.
Yeah.
Your face says it all.
Yeah.
Couldn't be done. Called the guy over, who apologised profusely, and got us some actual beers.
Yes.
Day 21, 3 weeks into our big European tour, and the last day of this stage. We're on our way from Nimes to the historic city of Carcassonne, riding through the national park of Haute-Languedoc. The weather's fine, the views are scenic, and the roads are simply excellent. However, I'm really feeling the effects of this long road trip. It seems that I've built up a kind of accumulated tiredness in the past few weeks that even a day off the bikes in Nimes hasn't been able to reset. Mike and I seem to arrive a bit more tired at the end of each touring day. Still, we've got a great location to end up in, and I'm looking forward to a mooch around. In the meanwhile, I'll have to console myself with finally getting to ride along one of those long tree-lined avenues that typify riding in France. Mike and I arrived hot and bothered, but to a warm welcome in Carcassonne. After a quick shower and a beer, we went exploring the ancient Cité, the fortified inner area that sits proudly above the more modern town. Over the past 2,500 years, the city has endured a checkered history of defence, occupation, abandonment, and finally rebuilding. It was restored in the 19th century by Viollet-le-Duc and joined the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1997. It's a truly captivating spectacle and a worthy sight to top off the third leg of our tour. Join us in part 4 when Mike and I travel through Andorra to Spain, the Pyrenees, and finally to the beautiful Picos de Europa.